everybody. So I'm currently at Loughborough University doing a PhD in cyber resilience. I spend a lot of time looking at smart cities, at technology on the horizon and red teaming them and working out ways to red team them to reduce the technical and security debt that they encounter. Now, before we go into the slides, what we've got on screen is a winning entry to a open data challenge that the city of Tokyo ran in the year before their Olympics. It's a live 3D digital twin of their entire transport network. Because they're the Japanese, when something's more than 30 seconds late, they highlight it in orange. 1 minute late, that driver is having a bad day. Imagine the same system for the UK, right? We have live CCTV. It is raining and night time at the moment in Tokyo. So the location of all of those vehicles is captured. The imagery, it's all pulled through from about 50 different data sources and presented, in this case, in this 3D visualization. However, to access all the data that sits behind this, all you really needed was an email address that didn't belong to like Gmail or Hotmail or Outlook. And congratulations, you've unlocked this data and you can build your own digital twin. I want you to keep this in mind as we go through the rest of the presentation, because it's one of our telling cases. But without further ado, he says, hoping. When PowerPoint decides not to play. Yeah. There we go. Turn up the subtitles. So, my argument is that what these digital twins give to threat actors, bad people, is kind of a treasure map, and what the military would call when they exercise special effects. You know, the thing, and they're called that for a reason. They're not the standard. They're not standard dialogue of how you go about business. They're the cool thing that needs a stuntman and some pyrotechnics to make happen. Well, some of these systems that are out there connecting our OT and the data feed from how our cities and places run and then made publicly available unlock an awful lot of capability for people who are not meant to be doing the things they're doing. To answer the question that you posed to the previous speaker earlier, one of the ways that you red team a connected place, a smart city, is you get to the stage where you have got your hand on the big red lever and you photograph your hand, and that's your evidence at the end of the report. And crucially, the difference between doing it as an ethical professional and the bad person is you don't pull that lever, whatever it may be, whether it's physical, digital, or interference with data. So some of these definitions are taken from the way our government does things. So the connected place is the British government's term for a smart place. It steps beyond smart cities, because when we stop and think about it, an airport or a large shopping centre like trying to remember it, Meadowhall, just outside Sheffield, has a lot in common with a smart city. They have their own utilities, they have their own services, they have their own surveillance, quite often their own fire or law enforcement, right, to make that place happen. So you'll hear me come back to that phraseology again and again. A digital twin is not just a model. It's a system that's built to have a near real-time and in-time connection to a live system or process or physical thing, so that you can extract the data, present it, view it, sometimes conduct some analysis, and then take what you've done and make changes back on the real thing. Now, in a Jaguar Land Rover point of view, this might be a 3D virtualization of one of their robotic arms, where they work out how much clearance they need around it when it's moving different size of car parts. You've just seen the one for Tokyo. The best example you all have, especially when we think of where we live, is Google Maps on your phone. Google Maps is a digital twin. It has live traffic data coming into it. It knows the time of day, so it can make predictive guesses on where you might encounter a traffic jam. But it also, crucially, has that feed back to the real system. Because when you see there's a traffic jam up ahead, and it says turn left to save 3 minutes, and you turn left, you have changed that real world system, because all of a sudden there's one less car in that traffic jam. And if 100 people follow that recommendation, there's 100 vehicles less in that traffic jam. So it is in many senses the digital twin you most use and are most familiar with, and that best fits the definition. And then a threat actor, the bad guys. Okay, for a non-cyber audience, this is quite important. But for you guys, it's not always just the hacker. It may also be a bank robber. It may also be a terrorist or a state-sponsored individual of some description. It may be Barry from accounts who's having a really, really bad day. It doesn't have to be a malicious person. It can be what I'm starting to call a shadow user, so somebody who takes advantage of a system in a way that they shouldn't be doing. We're going to very quickly zoom through an intro to red teaming, which people in the room shouldn't need. A talk about how we've gone about red teaming these smart cities through their digital twins. It has been a desktop exercise, mainly because I didn't want to go to war with 10 different countries during the course of this piece of research, and then some of the results that we encountered. So red teaming is role-playing the enemy. It's a Cold War phraseology, right? We had the blues and the reds. Some of you, by passport and by origin, would have been on Team Red originally. You know who you are, right, yeah? And it's just one of those things, a simple color-coded definition that says the other side. But it's not the same as just being a different flavor of IT professional. And where James was right this morning in terms of don't just keep buying more stuff. See, I'm going the PG definition of his title. Don't keep buying more stuff is the stuff that we use often also deals with the threats that we already know about. It doesn't deal with that creative malcontent. It doesn't deal with the unexpected action. And what a good red team should do is expose the things that your normal practices don't proof you against. It can be structured against frameworks. So we've all seen the MITRE definitions and the MITRE frameworks for different APTs. You could quite happily decide today I'm going to be Leviathan, or today I'm going to be, a given North Korean threat actor who's motivated by financial theft, or a given Russian threat actor who's motivated by their political ideology. And it can be set against defined aims. Now, this might not necessarily be the lever that they first pull. I would argue that very few people want to turn the power off to turn the power off. They want to turn the power off because they're the only person carrying a torch. They want to turn the power off because when they turn the power off, the following thing also shuts down, and that's their window of opportunity to sow discontent or to commit sabotage or to rob a bank. And this is why, from a cybersecurity perspective, red teaming is something a lot of us aspire to. Should be fun. And the reason it should be fun is it should be creative. It shouldn't just be a case of repeating the same methodologies because you've seen them again. And that's very different to the way you might do it in a CTF environment where, okay, I'm looking for something in this system. Oh, and it's a I'm looking at a Unix-based system, and I've identified the following unpatched system, and I'm going to. That's an exercising red team. That isn't being a red teamer from the point of view of finding and identifying novel vulnerabilities. So we took 10 connected places, most of them smart cities, and the systems that those places lent in on for a desktop red teaming exercise. And we asked a simple question: what damage can we do with the information and levers provided? And we considered that against a relatively generic threat actor model to try and map out the types of threat actors that might be interested in pulling those levers. Now, at Loughborough, and partly because of professional practice that predates this, we have a threat actor model that we use for connected places, for OT environments, that I've lovingly annotated with pop culture references. So we build a matrix, and the matrix goes on how well do you understand what you're looking at and how much technology do you have available to attack it. So at the top of the tree, we have our high understanding, high tech threat actors. They've got all the tricks of the trade and all the tools that they can use to do classic cybersecurity attacks. You know, they'll send through their malware, they'll pivot through the system, and they will pull those digital levers. They are the people who normally the SOC will be concerned with. At the other end of the scale, we have low understanding, low tech. So imagine we want to make a subway train late, right? The high understanding, high tech person gets into the signaling system and turns something off, or messes with the data stream and exploits credentials. The low understanding, low tech person throws a bag of bricks onto the railway line. In both cases, that train is 20 minutes late. In both cases, that actual objective, not the thing they've done, what they want to achieve, that 20-minute delay has been achieved. One is a very advanced actor, one is simple. But we only need to look at I believe it was attributed to Russia, the Russian arson attacks near the high-speed railway lines in France immediately before the Olympics, to see that sometimes just setting fire to some shit next to a railway line has an effect. It doesn't have to. That feeds all the way through your OT system and all the way through your monitoring and flashes the same lights on the screens of that network operator as if they'd have been much more advanced. And then in the middle, we've got two other categories that are fun to play with. One is emergent and is becoming more and more problematic. Low understanding, high tech. Quite often, these are the people who traditionally would have paid your hackers for hire. But these days I think the cost is down to about £12,000 at the moment. You can dark web source, do not do this would be illegal. You can dark web source a pre-built LLM that comes on a server, you patch it into the internet, and it contains a vulnerabilities library. And it can be given commands in English to go after systems that you can identify to that box. So, as Batman's saying, the superpower is just being rich. You don't understand what you're doing, but you've still got access to all the toys and all the tools, because we now have this mediation layer that sits between them and what a traditional hacker would have needed. And then we have high understanding, low tech. This person might not even be spotted or detected. They're the person who causes that 20-minute delay by knowing which one of the little holes on the door of the subway train houses the door close sensor. So they push chewing gum into it. It's not the security team that deal with that, the men in the yellow coats who've got that bag of bricks off the line, and it's not the SOC that deal with that. It's Mrs. Miggins, the cleaner. So you don't necessarily even know you've had a security incident. And those people are out there as well. And quite often when we've red teamed real places, it's those methodologies that have been the most telling, not for here. So we went after 10 places and we started to identify trends, and I've deliberately grouped these. So these were, the trend here is we've got is mapping. Okay, so Tokyo 3D we've seen. Line search before you dig is a UK-based system. Who's got a non-Gmail email address? All of you, you're at university. So who wants to find all of the mapping of every single power cable, gas pipe, water pipe within a 15-mile radius with detailed engineering diagrams of the substations and where all the off valves are? Right, well, you can get it. Okay, and it's publicly accessible. That system is designed so that if you're building a new extension on your house, you put your postcode in and it tells you whether you're going to hit a gas main as you dig the foundations. But it automates the delivery of that high definition mapping. So what can you do with that mapping? Well, because it comes out in text searchable PDF files, you can type in things like police or hospital or stadium. Or anybody not a Manchester United fan fancy turning the power off to their next game? Because you can do that. You can give it a Manchester postcode and then you can type in stadium and you can trace all the cabling that comes out of that venue. And think about the onward repercussions of that. The Singapore model is as good as the other two, but it's much more difficult to exploit because they've deliberately made a restriction to government users only. Same data, far more locked down. So actually, their biggest threat is an insider threat. Their biggest threat is that somebody in their planning office is going to help their brother-in-law breach planning regulations. Because all of the extreme stuff, well, they're already in government employee. It's the same with the Dubai system. Some of the effects are harder to achieve because once we've got past the public dashboards, it's locked down. But the smart Dubai is fascinating because you can see microclimates. You can plan the effect down to the level of putting a new air conditioning on the side of a tower block and the effect that will have on wind flow, on dust migration around the city. It's an incredibly powerful tool that, if manipulated, if used in the wrong way, could be used to work out how to get into any building or room in the city. The London data store, nobody has really got round to building visualizations off this, but this was the data set we looked at to craft this warning around, right? If at one end of the spectrum we've got Tokyo and the other we've got Singapore, where do we want London to be? Where is it safe to have stuff? I'm going to skip through. Shanghai is cute, and I've put it alongside Amsterdam and Barcelona, because what we tend to find is as we get to places where we'd naturally consider the internet and digital rights to be far more restricted, they are far less vulnerable. When you're in a society like ours, like Japan, where they go, this is everybody's data, have the data. Make your own visualizations. Make sure that your house is situated the right way around your power lines and utility connections. No, you don't need to pay the government a fee for that. Just get the mapping. Have a nice day. You create onward vulnerabilities because it's a cyber, physical, social effect. Whereas when we're in places like Shanghai or the Emirates, or where actually we think, well, those people, those societies, those legal frameworks have far less digital freedoms, actually they're not therefore as vulnerable to some of these attacks as we might be here, for example. I've shown you the Mini Tokyo 3D model. What's your worst case scenario for that? Is anybody here born in the 80s other than me? No, bless. You gonna? Slightly earlier, right, good. Okay, so you should remember this. So in 1995, there was a terrorist incident in Tokyo. Yeah, that's right. The release of sarin gas on their underground, homemade chemical weapon by but essentially Japan's equivalent of right-wing nut jobs. There's a nicer way to say that, but I almost refuse to give them the definition that they don't deserve. Yeah, a cult. They killed 13, injured 6,000, some of whom are still living with the effects now. You've got to feel bad for the Japanese, right? Because if you want to know the long-term effects of nuclear or chemical weapons, the place to get the data is the Japanese public health system, because that's where these things seem to keep happening. Geographic chance. But the challenge I pose is, if we were to use that map I showed you earlier as a planning tool for that same attack, what do you do to the numbers? With just the mapping I showed you that records passenger numbers and locations of vehicles and weather, and you could probably have a reasonable guess that you would be able to add a 0, 2 zeros to those figures. Where it gets really scary is actually using the same data set. If you wanted to, you could probably get to a point of statistical confidence in what you would do with such an attack, because you would be able to know, not guess, know at what point you could optimize the release of your chemical agent.
Not that, you could also then